Color grading is hard, particularly when you start out and you haven't really gotten your head around all of the different editing techniques and the different ways to color and style your photographs. The first step to editing any photograph is to get your base edits correct so that you've got the correct exposure, the correct white balance, etc, etc, etc. However, the next step comes after that, and that's when you start creating a look to your photograph so that it gets a particular style or image, or it harkens back to some particular kind of emotion or feel that you want to try and get out of it. So for instance, you're probably familiar with the orange and teal look that comes with a lot of cinema at the moment. Orange and teal is a particular style which you can get in various kind of LUTs or lookup tables in videography and so on. However, in stills photography, we have what we call styles. When you're using Capture One, styles come already preloaded inside Capture One itself, and it's fairly easy to be able to find them. All you do is when you're looking at your images, you'll see you have a style tab inside the top menu of your Capture One bar. If you click on that, you'll see you have various styles under here, custom styles, built-in styles, and built-in presets. There's a difference between a preset and a style, and I'll come to that in a moment. However, what styles are is they give a particular look to your photograph, and you'll see that the built-in styles in Capture One start with base edits, black and white, creative edits, film and cine looks. So if I take a photograph like, for instance, this young man on a donkey in Morocco, taken on a workshop with Nature's Light, you will see that if I go into creative looks, if I just hover over each one of these particular styles, you will get a bit different kind of color grading to those images itself. And if I want to apply it, all I need to do is I click on it, and there you go. That style is now applied to the photograph. You'll see those particular changes in the Adjust tab over here. And the styles, so for instance, it's dropped my highlights, it's increased my shadows, and it's probably done some other stuff inside the color balance. If we take a look at the color balance, you can see the wheels have been altered ever so slightly. So that is how a style works basically. Capture One has a limited number of styles available to it. You can of course purchase more styles from Phase One, and Capture One has them in various packs that you can get. But those are only just a starting point, basically. This is where creating or purchasing your own styles can make a huge difference to your editing workflow. They can speed up your workflow, and they can make life easier for you in the long run. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take a quick dive into how we apply styles to our photographs, as well as how we can use them to streamline our workflow and essentially speed up the output for which we are able to produce images for a client or for ourselves. Before going into how we use styles though, I am going to mention a particular style pack that is available from Alexon Raw. Now Alexon Raw is a site that provides Capture One tutorials, Capture One styles, presets and plugins, and it's created by Alexander Svet, who's been working with Capture One for the last 16 years, providing these presets to users. For a limited time this summer, there is a summer sale on all of his presets, his plugins, his styles, and his Capture One courses. You can head over to his site, which is in the links below. However, you can add an additional 10% by using the code EMIL10 when you check out. So this will be applied to on top of any other discounts. And going forward, of course, if you want to purchase any of his styles packs, you will also be able to apply EMIL10, and you'll be able to get a 10% discount off of that. So I'm going to finish off by looking at how you can use Alex Svet's particular style packs, but this applies essentially across the board to any styles, including those that you are going to build for yourself. So let's start with how we apply styles to a photograph. It's important to realize that a style can only really be applied to a photograph that has already been corrected. When I refer to an image that's corrected, I mean a photograph that has its exposure and its white balance already correctly set. If I take a look at this photograph of a Moroccan Berber man taken during a Nature's Light workshop, you'll see the image is ever so slightly underexposed. Now, using the Alexon Raw color grading styles, if I go through into custom styles, and you will see that I have pro grading styles here, there's an entire range of styles. If I cycle through all of these, you'll notice that the style doesn't necessarily fit the image particularly yet. I still need to actually adjust the photograph so that it is correctly exposed. It's too dark. So if I go back into my adjust and I just give it a quick levels adjustment, so we'll come down to levels over here and we will bring in our levels so that it's correctly adjusted over here. It might need a little bit more exposure, just like this. There we go. Now if I go back into styles, you'll see that the actual styles themselves suddenly have a much bigger effect on the photograph and will potentially look better as well. Now looking at the styles themselves, you'll see I've only got the pro color grading styles here at the moment. There are additional creative editing styles available too. What you will find here is that you've got landscape styles, which all starts with L, portrait styles, which all have a P next to them, and we also have universal styles, which all have a U setting at the beginning, or a U nomenclature at the beginning. This gives you a basic idea as to where to look, but all of the styles are going to be applicable to any photograph you'd like. For instance, I can scroll through those until I see something that I like. Ginger Mint looks pretty good over here, so I'm just going to click on Ginger Mint, and that means that this is now being applied. And you'll see I have some high dynamic range changes over here. I have some color changes that have happened inside my three-way styles. What's really cool about this, though, is that I haven't had to fiddle with all of the other settings myself. So if you're not familiar with how to edit your image in terms of its color settings, it makes it really quick and easy to be able to look through the styles themselves that are applied via just the press of a button. However, the press of a button is not necessarily the best way to apply a style. The best way to apply a style to any photograph is as a separate layer. Inside your styles here, what I would suggest you do is you go, for instance here, I liked Ginger Mint. You right click and then you say apply to new layer. Inside your layers, you will now see that I have a separate layer on top of image layer. So my base image layer remains unchanged, and you can see quickly the before and after between Ginger Mint and not having it. The other way to see your before and after is of course to just hit your Y button, or to use the actual before and after slider. And I quite like the split view slider here, so you can see the before and after. Of course, the before also excludes any changes that you've made to your exposure itself, so bear that in mind when you are looking at your before and after versions of the photograph. Okay, so that's a quick look at how you can apply a style to a portrait. But if we look, for instance, at a landscape over here, I'm going to quickly adjust the photograph with a automatic control Command L to get my exposure correct, and then we're going to go back into our styles and we're going to take a look and see what styles work here. So for instance, this travel setting here, outer space sunset, works really, really nicely. I quite like that. So I would just go to apply to new layer, and it's applied to a new layer. So we can go back to our adjust, and again to see the before and after. And you'll notice that there are some changes again to the high dynamic range, and all of the color settings have probably been adjusted as well. It's taken the grunt work, the hard work, out of creating a good color grade to your image. Here's a quick tip in terms of if you're looking at the photographs and you're trying to figure out which one actually works for your photograph. Sometimes doing the whole split view doesn't necessarily work particularly well. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take my photograph, let's take this back to its original state. So we're going to say reset, and then I'm going to correct my exposure just by hitting Command L, which is all of my auto settings to get the exposure correct as well as my white balance. So now I have my base image, which I can apply any style to. I'm then going to clone this photograph. So I'll go down to my film strip and I will say clone variant. So I now have two images over here. If I go through to my style button, you'll notice at first that as I cycle through my styles, both of the images change. And that's because Capture One is applying all of the changes to all of the selected images. What I need to do is actually switch off this little toggle here, which is Edit Selected. I personally like having that Edit Selected up on my toolbar. You can also access that by going up through to Image, Edit All Selected Variants, or Shift Command E. I personally prefer having that just on the top menu bar because it's nice and quick and it's accessible. Now that we have that switched off, it means that as I cycle through my styles, you'll see that only one changes. And again, I really liked that outer space sunset look. So if I applied my outer space sunset look, you can see the two images before and after. And of course, after that, you can delete your clone if you'd like to, and you can just apply it to your original photograph. One of the things that I particularly like about the Alex on RAW styles, though, is not that you have just a base style over here. You also have your pro grading styles as a layer. Importantly, you've got layers as 50% or layers as 75%. As I can go into Pro Color Grading Styles, and I quite like that Outer Space Sunset. So if I apply that, you'll notice now that when I go to adjust, I have 3 layers already set up over here. I've got my details, I've got color, and I've got exposure. Each of those adjustments that has been created for your styles is now in a layered pattern, meaning that you can adjust them yourself. So if I want to change my details, I can bring that down. I can slide that across, or I can make it 100%. The color I can also change just by going to my opacity sliders and changing them. There's an infinite variability to the style once you've applied it to your photograph. If you've watched a previous Capture One tutorial of mine, which I will put in the top left-hand bar over here, you'll see that I quite like the layered approach to editing. Essentially, again, what the style is doing is it's taking the grunt work out of it, and it's producing styles in a layered format so that you have your own personal control over it. Okay, so let's look at how we can use styles to speed up our workflow if you have a group of photographs that are all relatively similar, or that you want to try and batch out so that they all have the same look. Here's a set of images that I shot for a fashion showcase for a college that I was working at the time. These images are all shot with the same kind of lighting style, and they're all ever so slightly underexposed. This was done on purpose at the time. I'm going to correct all of the images, and using a style, I'm going to come out with a look that works for all of the images and then apply them all in one go. To start off with, I'm going to take my first image and I'm going to just get it correctly exposed. So we'll go to our exposure, we'll open that up, and white balance I will just quickly pick from the background, because of course it was 18% gray that I was using as a backdrop. That image is now correctly exposed, or at least the exposure that I would like it set to. So I'm going to go to my smart adjustments, and I'm going to set that as a reference. So I'll say set reference. I'm then going to select all of my other images over here, and what we're going to do is make sure that edit selected is switched on, and we are then going to say apply. Automatically all of the images are going to be the same white balance, more or less, and the same exposure. Now we'll go back to that initial photograph. I would like to change both the subject and the background based on their style. We're going to go for this kind of orange teal look, potentially. To first work on the background, I'm going to select background from my layers and masks, and it's automatically going to build up a background mask, and you'll see if I hit my M button to see it, that looks pretty good. We'll then go through to our style selection, and using just the standard Pro Color Grading styles, we will look for a background that actually works over there. So I'm going to say old-fashioned looks pretty good, actually. It's kind of black and whitey, but it's got some decent color inside there. So I'm going to say apply that to my selected layer over there. There we go. And let's just go back into adjust. I also want to try and reduce some of the contrast here, so we'll just take our contrast back so that we can smooth out our background a little bit. And I also think I should take my clarity and bring that back just a touch to reduce some of the issues that I've got on the paper. Later on, obviously, I'll have to go out and I'll have to clone the fact that I have a tear in the paper in the bottom right-hand corner. We've now applied that to the background only. The foreground is still the same. I want to still apply something to her standing in the middle there. So what we will now do is create another subject selection. So we'll take a subject selection. You can see it has been applied above the background mask. If I check my mask itself, it looks pretty good. And we'll then go into our styles, and we will look for something that works just on her. Cover portrait looks nice. I quite like that warmth there. So I'm going to say right click, apply to selected layers, and we'll go back to our adjust. And there we go. I think I might just open up the exposure just on her a little bit. So we'll go down into our HDR controls over here and just open up the shadow just a touch, not too much. Now, if I am happy with that edit and I want to apply it to all the other images as well, all I need to do is copy that. So I'm going to say Shift Command C, which is going to copy all of my adjustments. I will then select the images that I'm wanting to apply them to, and I will say Shift Command V. Now it's going to take a few moments to do this. The slower your computer, the longer it's going to take, because it is also automatically working out the mask for each of those images. So if I now select one of those images, you will notice that it has the same color style and everything as the previous photographs, and of course it has this in a layered approach with the styles that we've created. And you can see that my mask is exactly as it should be with each of the photos. So let's go back to the subject mask here. There we go, perfect. And again, and again. Brilliant. The next step that I would do over here obviously is I'm going to crop the images down to the way I would like them to be. So we would quickly crop. There we go. I think it needs to have a little bit of a vignette, and we would probably also have to fix up some of the flooring that we've got at the bottom. Okay, that's the finicky stuff, but your basic final result is going to look something like that, which is, I think, pretty good. I'm happy with that. So we can use the same kind of concept when we're working with images. So for instance, of these dunes, let's say I'm going to work on one of those, and we're going to jump into our styles over here. I think it is maybe a little underexposed, so I'm going to hit the Command L just to be able to correctly expose the image. So Command L, remember, is your auto settings, and you can adjust what happens inside there by clicking on your auto adjust, and here you'll see it adjusts my exposure, contrast and brightness, and my high dynamic range. I'm actually going to switch off the high dynamic range over here, and I'm going to say Command L. Then we will go into our styles. I'm going to look at my Pro Color Grading styles, 50%. And looking at the landscape, I kind of want a black and white shot, so sharp black and white is pretty good actually. We've only got the one black and white in this particular color grading set, but the sharp black and white does work. I quite like that. Remember, you can also stack layer styles on top of each other. I like that black and white, but I want more crunchiness to it. I just need to make sure that my selection up here, stack styles, has been switched on. If I have that switched off, I can only do one style at a time. And you'll see if I do old-fashioned, whatever, it's always only going to have one style. Now I'm going to switch on, we're using the contextual menu, stack styles, and I quite liked the sharp black and white. So I'm going to, I've applied that to my image. Now if I want to apply another style to it, I can go through these styles to find something that works. Ah, there we go, that's nice. Brute force adds a little bit more clarity to some of the shadows in the background. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say apply. And now we've got two styles that have been applied to this particular image. If I quite like that as a style, I'm going to say Shift Command C, and I will look for my other photographs of dunes over here. We're going to select those, and we're just going to apply the same settings to all of those photographs. And there we go. Styles are a very useful and fast way to create a look or a particular color grading to your photograph without having to go into the nitty-gritty of changing every small thing yourself. From a list of styles, you can select the one that best matches your image, and of course you can still tweak it at a later stage, particularly if you use the layered approach to working with those styles. So as I mentioned earlier on, there are creative styles as well as color grading styles available on the Alex on Raw site. There are other sites out there as well. Alex on Raw has just been doing this for quite a long time. You can even use these as a basis on how to create your own styles in future. So treat it as a learning exercise in that case. If you're interested in purchasing these, there is a summer sale going on right now until the 16th or 17th of July, and you can of course apply the code Emil10 and you will get an additional 10% on your purchase. In summary, it is important to remember that a style is best applied to a photograph that has already been corrected in terms of its exposure, its levels, and its white balance. Styles don't work particularly well on a photograph that hasn't been corrected, and that's where presets come into play. If you look at Capture One, you'll see that we have built-in presets. Here is where you've got your various curves and your color editors and your color balance, and this is where you're going to correct your photograph, or you can just use the sliders in the adjust panel itself. But the basic idea is that you first correct your image if it isn't correct already, and then you apply the style, which is going to be the final look to the photograph itself. The closing image, I'm going to look at this photograph of a farmer shot in Madagascar on the most recent Nature's Light workshop that I was leading. I'm just quickly going to correct it using my auto levels. So I'm auto leveling it. You can see that the contrast has disappeared ever so slightly, but his face has come out quite nicely. And then I'm going to go into my color grading styles styles using the layered approach. And bronze portrait looks pretty good, but cover portrait looks nice as well. I actually think hazy portrait is where I'm going with this particular image. So I'm going to apply that. And you'll see that inside my adjustment layers, I have got various layers over here. The color I'm happy with. I would like to boost up my exposure a little bit. We're going to push that out to 100%. And then I'm going to finally add another layer over here. So I'm going to apply a new filled adjustment layer. And we're going to increase our clarity, push the clarity out just a touch over there. And then finally, I'm going to go into my curve. Go into the curve, and we're going to just boost the exposure just a touch there and bring in a vignette around the outside. And you can see my before and after is there. Bear in mind that styles are very subjective, so what works for you might not work for everybody else. Regardless, using styles as a starting point to learning how to create your own color grading and your own look is a fantastic and fast way to get into color grading itself. Right, thanks very much for watching. I hope you found this useful. Remember, styles are a great way to get started into doing your own color grading, and I hope to bring you some more examples like this in the future. Till then, cheers.